Hello and welcome back to Indie Rebel, the podcast for independent filmmakers. My name is Christopher Temple, and today we're going to be talking about scheduling your independent film. This is extremely important because um, it's going to dictate what your budget is. It's going to need to be something that you use to accommodate actor availability, especially at the independent level. And it's really a key part of making a feature film. You may find that when you're doing short films, scheduling isn't as important. It's pretty much you show up on the day and you shoot your film because most short films are going to be like a 1 day, maybe 2 day shoot max. But when you're doing a feature, you're looking at, 12 days, 14 days, 20 days, 30 days. It can really become a big project. And so it's important to be able to manage all that. And in order to figure out what order you need to shoot things in. And so that all falls into scheduling. I've shot 5 feature films, and my scheduling process has been a little bit different on each one. When I did Wolf, I did everything completely by hand. Wolf was my $600 feature. Very first podcast I did talked about how I made the film. But all the scheduling was done by hand. We're going to talk about how to do that today. And then over time, I started changing and using like more software and things like that. When I did my second one called Leap back in 2009, I did that with Celtics and used the scheduling module inside of there. I went back to doing it by hand for Leap Rise of the Beast. And then Surviving the Wild, I used Movie Magic scheduling. And I also used Movie Magic scheduling for Leap A Tale of the Last Days, which is the one I'm finishing up right now. So it has changed a little bit, but I've now found a method that works for me, and that's what I'm going to share with you today is my method and my way of doing this. It is important to remember that even though you might have this super detailed scheduled plan, remember that rarely will that schedule ever stay set in stone. My schedules are always changing during a movie as the actor's availability changes or location availability changes. Things that I thought I had lined up, and then it turns out they're not lined up, and we got to jostle things around. So the schedule is not God, for lack of a better term. It's not the Ten Commandments. It's not written in stone. The schedule is there as a guideline. Because again, kind of like what we've talked about before, like with storyboards, it's there as a worst case scenario. Like, hey, this is what the plan is going to be. And as long as we can do this, we'll be able to make the movie happen. So let's talk about how to actually begin scheduling your indie feature. And it starts with a breakdown of the script. And you can either do this by hand or you can use software to do it. If you're writing in Final Draft and you've got like one of the newer versions of Final Draft, like 12 and 13, there's a tagging function built into it. If you don't have Final Draft or you're using an older version of Final Draft, then there was a separate utility that came with it called Final Draft Tagger, or Tagger 2, I think is what it was called, the most recent one. And you could download like a trial for Final Draft 9. And if you can install that on your computer, Tagger gets installed automatically. And you can use Tagger with any of the other screenwriting softwares that are out there. So if you're writing in Faden, which is the number 2 choice right now, then you could still export a Final Draft file and import that into Tagger, and you can still go down and do your breakdowns that way. So what is a breakdown? I've been talking about this now. In a nutshell, a breakdown is basically just going through your script and you are tagging or highlighting or underlining every single thing that you need to make the film happen. And you're going to use a different color for each category. So this is where it's nice to get out like your 24 pack of, Crayola pencils or even markers. And you're going to say, okay, set dressing is going to be one color. Actors are one color. Locations are a color. Visual effects are a color. Any special effects on set, any special costumes, any vehicles, any stunts, animals, all these kinds of considerations that you need to be aware of. You're going to have a different color for each one. And you're going to go through the script and you're going to do and underline and find every single thing that you can find that would need to be underlined or notated. And it's very important that you be extremely detailed while you do this. All right. I mean, I'm talking even like time of day needs to be accounted for. Is it a night shoot? Is it a day shoot? Because night shoots require a different set of equipment than a day shoot would, and that sort of a deal. Once you've gone through and you've tagged every element in your script like this, you're now going to, if you're not using software, if you're doing this all by hand, you need to get online and download a breakdown template and print them out, one for each scene. And basically, it's kind of like a big grid, or a graph, I guess you could say. And so all your different categories are going to be there. And up at the top of the page, you'll put the scene number, the basic scene information, interior, exterior, where it's at, what time of day, what page of the script it falls on. And then you're going to go down and you're going to find, like, there's a section for cast, and you're going to write down all the cast members that you need in that scene. There's a section for extras. Do you need extras in that scene? And then, just like all the other stuff that you just got done highlighting and underlining, any stunts, any visual effects, any special props, any special considerations, you're going to write them all down on this piece of paper, and you're going to have one paper per scene. So now let's say you've got a movie script with 100 scenes. When you're all done with this, you're going to have 100 breakdown sheets for your film. Now, if you are using software and you did your tagging digitally, like with Tagger or even within Final Draft, then all that stuff's going to get carried over automatically when you go do your breakdowns. Now, I do my breakdowns inside of Movie Magic Scheduling, and I like the way it works. It's kind of becomes a big database. You just import your script. Everything that's tagged automatically gets propagated right there, and you can go through and fine tune and tweak things if you forgot something and all that. So really, really handy, and it takes a lot of the pain out of doing it by hand, but it is good to do it by hand just to get that experience too. Now, aside from all these categories that we've talked about, you're also going to want to make sure that you add two more bits of information to your breakdown sheet, and that is your eighths and estimated shooting time. Eighths is simply a measure of how long each scene is. It refers to eighths of a page. So if you're doing this all by hand, and I've done this, before in the past, what I did is I bought one of those fancy triangle-shaped rulers where, like, when you look at it from a side profile, it looks like a little triangle. So the ruler itself has 3 different sides to it. And I, using a Sharpie, accounted for the margins of my page and broke it down into 8 sections on the ruler. And I labeled them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I could then go through my script by hand and manually measure out the eighths of a page. And so if your page is, or your scene is 1.5 pages long, then that would be 1 and 4/8. So eighths of a page is kind of that smallest form of a script that we use in the industry to kind of help with the planning processes and figuring out how long this is all going to take. If you're using any sort of special software, again, like Movie Magic, it handles the eights automatically. It counts them up and you don't even have to think about it. And that's really nice and really handy. The other piece of information we need is we need you to estimate how long you think that scene is going to take you to shoot. And you want to work in about 15-minute intervals. Well, I work in 15-minute intervals. You could work in hour-long intervals. If you're going to say, no scene should ever take me less than an hour, then you're going to use an hour as your basis. I work in 15-minute intervals. I find that works out just fine. And this is something you're really only going to be able to know through practice. And this is why you need to have done a couple of short films before you go make your first feature, is because you're going to know about how long your scenes are going to take you to shoot if you've done a couple of shorts. Same with the eights. You're going to know, hey, if I'm shooting a dialogue scene, I can shoot 4 and 4/8 of a page in a day, no problem. If I'm doing action, I might only be able to shoot, 3/8 of a page because that action bit's going to take up a lot more time on the page. So get some experience doing this, but you really need to go through and have your eights and have a good estimation of how long it's going to take you to shoot. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. I always will pad out my estimated time by even 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how comfortable I feel in my estimation of how long I think it'll take me to do. It's kind of like, if you go backpacking or camping and you're making a fire and you gather all your firewood, when you think you've had enough, you get 3 times the amount because realistically, that is what you're going to burn through in an evening. And it's the same thing here. When you think you know how long a scene's going to take, pad it out, add an extra 30 minutes to it, add an extra hour to it. And that kind of, conservatism is going to help you out greatly on the day and make for more stress-free days, which is good. We don't want a lot of stress on sets. Sets are stressful enough. Now, the reason all this information is important to have is because you're going to make your schedule based on who is in the scene. You're going to want to try to lump actors and locations together, and you're going to need to be aware of how long each scene is going to take you to do. And so now we get into the fun part, which is the actual scheduling process. Uh, I do think scheduling is kind of fun because it's like trying to solve a big puzzle, and there's a lot of variables involved that you've got to take into account and things you got to move around, and there's a lot of mental gymnastics at times. But it's a lot of fun to do that. It's probably my favorite part of the producing process is creating the schedule. Like I said earlier, this does not have to be set in stone. I always will make as soon as I finish my first draft of the script, I go and I do a preliminary schedule. Like ideal best case scenario, if all the actors were on my clock and I could have them whenever I wanted, I could have whatever locations I want when I wanted them. What is that schedule going to look like? And by having that preliminary schedule, it allows me to later on when I am talking with actors and they want to know, well, how long is the shoot going to be? I can say it'll probably be around 17 days or so. I am going to have a little bit of an idea in advance. It's also going to lead into budgeting as well, which we're going to talk about next week. And because you can't accurately budget a film unless you know how long you need everything for. So make your schedule the instant you finish that first draft of the script, or at least make it your first version of the schedule. Now, I like working with a real calendar rather than a strip board, and those are the two main methods of scheduling. Strip boards is the old school, old Hollywood way. They would literally take pieces of cardboard or poster board, cut it into strips, and each strip had the scene number, whether it was an interior or exterior, what the time of day was, where it was to be shot, and who was involved in it, how many eights, and how long they thought it would take to shoot. Nowadays, you'll find strip boards are everywhere because they're very easy to program, and so there's tons of digital versions. I've even seen people use Excel or a spreadsheet and build their strip boards out in there. You can download some from a Studio Binder. I think they've got a template you can use to do that kind of a thing. Strip boards are super handy because, yeah, you're just rearranging your strips around until you make your day. But I prefer the calendar. I like that more God's eye view of seeing what's already come and what's coming down the pipe. When you're looking at a strip board, it's a lot harder to do that because by the nature of it being a strip, you're only looking at maybe a day or a half a day on your screen at any given time. So a calendar, I can see the entire month and I can actually start dragging my scenes onto the calendar that way. And again, I'm looking to see, what's being lumped together. How long is stuff going to take me to do? Because all these now digital versions will automatically add up your eights and your estimated shooting time. So if you only wanted to have 12-hour days, you want to be adding up your estimated shoot time. You can't do, if this scene's going to take me 4 hours and this scene's going to take me 2 hours, but I know this other scene's going to take me 8, I probably can't do all of those in one day. Something's got to give there because I know that that's more than 12 hours and I don't want to work more than 12 hours. So you'll need to play with all that kind of stuff. So back to what I was saying. I'm sorry for the rambling for a second. Calendars. I like having a calendar. If you don't have the software, if you don't have Movie Magic, you can get a whiteboard and a yardstick and a Sharpie and draw a calendar grid on your whiteboard. This is actually what I did for Leap Rise of the Beast. And so I drew that with Sharpie, and then I went through then with dry erase markers, and then I just started writing the scene numbers down on the calendar. And we actually had it up in my apartment because that was a major filming location. So it was always right there, and the cast could always just go look at it and say, oh, yeah, this is what we're shooting tomorrow. And it really worked out well, and it was quite handy. As you may have guessed by now, doing this all digitally is a lot easier than doing it all by hand. But if you are going to do this by hand because you can't afford Movie Magic, because it's like $400 or $500, like it's spendy. What you're going to want to do is take all your breakdown sheets and start off by sorting them by location. So you're going to pull it out of script order and you're going to say, okay, all the scenes at the scary castle are go in this pile. All the scenes at the bed and breakfast go in this pile. And you're going to start to sort them all out by location. Now you're going to add up your estimated shooting times for each location. This will tell you how many hours and days you're going to need each location for. So, for instance, if your estimated time for a single location is going to be 16 hours, you're probably going to need that location for more than one day. You're going to need at least 2 days out of that. And so when you go to schedule those scenes, make sure you account for that. Make sure that you've got 2 days on the schedule to shoot those scenes. And then from here, it's really just putting your scenes on a calendar based on the location and actor availability. If you don't have actors yet, pay attention to the characters. You don't want a full day filming with two characters, only to then have a scene at the end where a third character comes in. That is a waste of that person's day and time. And a lot of times, you're either going to be running way ahead of schedule and the person hasn't showed up yet, or you're going to run way over schedule and now the person's sitting there twiddling their thumbs and they're not going to come back and help you the next time you need them. So I typically will try to only schedule like a group of characters in one day and stick with that group the entire time. And then again, you want to pay attention to lumping scenes together. If you're filming at a specific house, at least initially, until you know what the availability of that house is, put all those house scenes, in one block on your calendar. You want to make sure that you're using the location and then you can get it cleaned up and move on and move past it. Now, there might be situations down the road where when you do actually find that location you're going to use and it's only available on the weekends, well, then that's going to change your schedule and you're going to have to go through and only shoot those scenes on the weekend because that's when that happens to be available. But for your initial schedule, lump all your stuff together. At the end of the day, it's really just a bunch of common sense and logic. There's no real magical formula. There's no real uh, equation and algorithm to doing this. You just look at it and say, what makes the most sense to me? And if you can start to, break your movie down, your indie feature into like more manageable chunks, that might help you too. If you just say, okay, today and tomorrow I need to shoot these scenes. What is the best way to shoot that? Now it's just like when you were shooting a short film, right? Except now you're going to do that over and over and over for every scene in your feature, which is going to be a lot longer. And if you keep at it and spend a couple days on it, eventually you're going to have an entire schedule for your feature, which is awesome. Give yourself a pat on the back. Congratulations. Like, that's a huge accomplishment right there. You're learning about producing and you're learning how to produce a feature length film. And then, like I mentioned earlier, once you have this ideal schedule made, now you've got a rough idea of what's needed and for how long you need it. It's easier to cast your actors now because you can tell them, here's how long I think I'm going to need you for. Here's kind of the days I'm looking at having you for. You can also go start on your budget. You now know if I've got these actors for 8 days and know that you also are going to need crew for those days and you know what those day rates are, you can see why it's important to have that schedule done first. You can't go straight to the budget. You've got to start with planning how long is this going to take me to shoot. Now, once you do cast your film and once you start finding locations, you're probably going to have to redo and redo and redo the schedule over and over and over again. And that is totally fine. I find my schedules go through almost as many changes as my script went through in pre-production leading up to actually filming the film. And that's just because actors say, even if you're paying people, hey, I've got another gig I'm doing over here. I can't make this day. How can we work around this kind of thing? Or, hey, I've got an appointment I got to go to in the afternoon on this day. And so you're going to have to accommodate that and go back into your, movie magic software or your whiteboard calendar and start moving stuff around. Again, though, keep a close eye on your estimated shooting time. Okay, that is extremely important. You do not want to overload yourself and have a 16-hour, estimated time and you've only got, a half day to do it. Like, that's just ludicrous to me. That makes no sense at all. Pro tip for you guys. This is kind of how I'm going to finish this up. I like printing my calendar schedule on a piece of paper and I stick it on the back of my script. So when I print out my shooting script, I've got a white binder with the clear inserts on the front where you can put in your own title pages and stuff. And it also has one on the back. And so what I do is I slide in the title page for the script on the front. And then on the back side is where I will put my schedule, because I always have my script with me on the shoots. And now, when we're working with the actors and stuff, I don't have time to go through and do call sheets every day. If you've got some crew members helping you out, then you can maybe look at doing something like that and put the time into it, or delegate it to somebody else. What I find I do is, at the end of the day, turn my script over. I look at the schedule. All right, guys. Hey, tomorrow we're doing da 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 da. So, make sure you've got this wardrobe, and I'll see you guys at this time at this location. Super handy having your schedule right there with you. So that's my big pro tip for you. And that's all there is to it. I mean, I wish I could talk longer about scheduling, but there's no secret sauce to it. It's just use some logic, use some common sense, have your breakdowns. Okay. So it all starts with tagging everything in the script and then breaking the script down. And most importantly, having your estimated time and your eights uh, accounted for, so you can, as you schedule, know, oh, yeah, I can make that day, or that day is super crazy. That's not going to happen. Once you get your schedule done, you can move on to budgeting, which is what we're going to talk about next week. So thank you guys so much for listening. My name's Christopher Temple, and you've been listening to Indie Rebel, the podcast for independent filmmakers.